Hello and well met. This is Lavrin with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today we're going to build the Kender Tasselhoff Burrfoot from the Dragonlance setting. I have the latest Unearthed Arcana, which is available on the Fantasy Grounds store. They only charge $1 for it. Just keep in mind that this stuff is not official. It is not something that is necessarily going to be in the new setting, although I think the Tasselhoff, the actual Kender race, will probably be in there. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this, and I've already took a test character and built that up. And what I found are some pretty interesting different little features that they have that could be fun, but it also could be a lot of work for the game master. So let's take a look at this character. So I'm going to build it again. So I just clicked the green button here on the right side for add item. And then I'm going to take and select a portrait. Now I have a custom one that I made for this particular build. So instead of going through the portraits area, I'm actually going to go through the assets and then click on tokens. This is where I have it stored. And then for the campaign, I just made this little token for this particular show. So there's the token for Tasselhoff Burrfoot. I used to use this image here. Now I'm going to, of course, put his name here. And in Fantasy Grounds, if you're going to use the drag and drop method instead of the character wizard, which I recommend for now, is to do the standard array, but you want to do like the building order of A, B, R, C, a battle ready character, or ability scores, background, race, class, and level. So I'm just going to use a standard array. Start with a 15 dex. I'm going to give him a 14 constitution, a 12 intelligence. He's pretty clever. Actually, a 12 charisma. He's going to have a 13. Let's see. 13 charisma, 12 intelligence, 10 wisdom, and 8 strength. So he's not very strong, but he's, can hold his own. So that's one. And then I'm going to take a background. Since I don't really have any official content yet from Wizard of the Coast, I'm just going to pick something that's close. I'm going to make him an entertainer. That's kind of what he did when he was in modules and such. So let's see what we can do here. So I'm going to take and drag and drop from the background. So to open this up, here's the entertainer background. So drag and drop that into the background area. And then for race, they have the Kender race, which will add some features that's pretty interesting. So we'll get into that as soon as I get this part done. So if I go to races, and I have the Unearthed Arcana loaded. So in my library under modules, there is the Unearthed Arcana, the players and the DMs side of things. So those are available on the Fantasy Grounds store for $1. So if you want to test some of this out, I wouldn't make it something permanent, but it's definitely available for testing anyways. So you want to look under Kender. So let's see what we got here. So take a look at Kender. Yeah, right here, Kender. So you take and drag and drop that, and adds everything that goes with it. And then we're going to do class and level, so we're going to make him a rogue. So I'm going to open up the class and level window just so I can see what's going on. And then I open up the actual classes. I'm going to drag and drop the rogue on. So this will be from the player's handbook. You can use the Unearthed Arcana version, but I'm just going to use the player's handbook version. And then I'm going to pick, I want to say, let's see what he already has. So if you go to his skills, he already has acrobatics and performance. So probably give him stealth, sleight of hand, perception, and maybe deception and lie. those are pretty good. So he's got 6 scores to pick from. So that's, or he has 6 skills to start with. That's pretty good. Most first level characters only get 4 or maybe 5 at the most. And then I'm going to level them up. So to do that, I'm just going to drag and drop this little shortcut here underneath this green plus button. Drag it once, drag it twice, and now you get your build. So I'm going to go ahead and take a thief, because I think that fits him the most. So here's his archetype build, and that's as far as I'm going to level him up. So that's basically the drag and drop process. The only thing that's really different in this particular case, since I don't have any additional class information, is the actual build itself with the race. One thing I noticed that wasn't right is this size. He's supposed to be small. So if you go to his traits, he has the brave trait, which is very similar to what most halflings get. It says creature type, you are a humanoid. And then it says Kender Ace, which is something I want to talk about. That's kind of difficult to manage as a GM. And then you have Taunt, which is a pretty cool feature. So what I noticed is that, first of all, when you drag the race over, if that's not put into the content properly, it's not going to put the race in properly on the character sheet. So if you go to the Notes tab, you're supposed to be small. So when you read the description of the Kender, they're supposed to be small. So if I go to the actual classes, and just remember that these are, or actually go to races, these are actually just test versions, so they're not going to be perfect. But if you look at this sheet here, it says size. It says you are small. So that right there, it makes it so it's not going to work properly. It should say your size is a small or something like that. This is why it didn't parse correctly. So you have to go in there and manually change that. So that's a problem build, and that's what they're given from Wizards of the Coast. So this is a test thing. So for a pen and paper, this is fine, but Fantasy Grounds, if you're going to parse, have anything automatically populated, it's got to be worded correctly. So that's a problem on their end. So these are all the traits here. So the only way to really fix that is if you make a copy of the Kender. So if you come over to races, open that up, you can make a copy of this race by dragging and dropping it back into this window, and then you'll have an editable version of it and unlock it. And then you can go in and change that size, because that's what's broken in this. So if you go to size here, this trait, open this up, you can say your size is small. So if you look at any other race, you'll see what I'm saying. So if you pick out, let's say something that's small, like a gnome or something. So if you go to all the races, let's pick out something like a halfling. That's pretty close. Let's see what this says, size. Yeah, your size is small, and that's why it didn't work. So when you actually go into that size, it shouldn't say you are small, it should say your size is small. And this is a Fantasy Ground thing, so when you're building characters and such, and if you're making a custom race, these have to be phrased correctly. So that's why it didn't carry over correctly. So that's something that I noticed right off the bat, that it was broken. But it's not that hard to go in and change that. The next thing is to check out the different features that they get. So for this brave action is actually very similar to what you're going to get with a regular character build. And then creature type is the one that was broken, so I fixed that in the copy I made. The one thing that I noticed it's a really cool trait, but it's going to be difficult to manage in a game, even for a pen and paper. So this Kender Ace ability, it gives you a table to choose from. And on that table, you get to pick different things. I honestly think if you spend the time and build this out and make this kind of like a module or something, this would help with the GM that has to deal with this. So at 3rd level, you get a magical ability to pull an item out of a bag or from another container, depending on what you're doing. But essentially, that is a magical ability. You can pull it out of a bag or another container as a bonus action. Then you can reach into a container you're carrying and roll on this Kender Ace table to determine what type of object you pull out. So the object will glow softly or glimmer, and it will disappear after an hour. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Okay, that part's not that bad. But what's tough on this one is, okay, so this first one you get 5d6 gold. Okay, no big deal. Just roll 5d6. There's a simple weapon of your choice that has the light property. So a GM would have to go through the weapons list in the items and have to figure out all the weapons that are basically light. And that's not an easy thing to do because you don't sort through. There's no sorting option other than this property section. So anything here that's light is what you can choose from for simple weapons. So that's something that may be problematic or time consuming during the middle of the game. So if your Kender pulls something out of their bag and you're not ready for it, that can be problematic. So and it's random on top of that. So I would make a table probably and roll on that, because you don't really get, I don't know, in this case you do get to choose. So maybe just make a list and let them pick from a list. That would be a lot easier than trying to go through all these during a game. The next thing is you get one item of your choice from the adventuring gear table in the player's handbook. The item must cost no more than 1 gold and weigh no more than 1 pound. So you have to sort through all that to figure out which ones are only weigh a pound and which ones are under 1 gold in cost. So that can be a real pain for the game master. You can do one random trinket item from the trinkets table. Well, traditionally, Fantasy Grounds didn't have the trinkets coded. They were just lists of items, and you just kind of typed it on your sheet. But if you use the Rob2E's 5e trinkets table, it actually has that. It just says one random item. So he has basically he's created these. They're not on a table, but at least the items exist. And you can just make your own table with those. And then it says you can choose from a crowbar or grappling hook. So I would just make a parcel of that. And then the 5d6 gold, you can make a table that generates that and outputs a random number. And then for the last thing, you get one item of your choice from the tools area in the player's handbook. It can cost no more than 10 gold. So you'd have to come down here and do a filter for tools, and then you'd have to know the price for all these. So this is a really cool ability for players, but on the GM side, that's a real pain in the butt. Because if you're in the middle of a game and you're having to deal with that, that's really time consuming to have to go through all that to figure out what it is they get. And then they roll on this table on top of that, so you don't know what they're going to get. Okay, in this case, it's 1, so it would be gold pieces. You roll again, number 5, it would be he can pick a crowbar or a grappling hook. So those aren't too bad, but when you start getting into these things where you have to go through all these lists to give them their item, that kind of really, really tough to do. So I like the ability and from the player standpoint, but from a game master standpoint, it looks like to be kind of a pain. And I'm not too thrilled about doing that in the middle of a game. So if you're a game master and this does become part of the official content, I would definitely do this stuff ahead of time or make a module that already has this figured out, because this is a lot of work for a game master in the middle of a game. Now, if you're able to award the item before an adventure or after, that's one thing. But they can use this twice in one game session, potentially. and it's a bonus action on top of that. So you got to be ready for that, and that's something that, you know, it depends on how you look at it, how you treat it. But I think that's kind of a real pain in the butt. So if you're going to run this Kender and they keep this trait, on pen and paper, it probably wouldn't be as bad because you're just looking down a list. But still, you're having to go through all that just to figure out what they're going to have. So that may not be very well done in playtest. So we'll see if they keep this. But if they do, I would make a list of these items and share that with your player. And when they use that ability, they can just tell you what they're going to use. And that makes it so much easier than trying to do this in the middle of a game. So that's just something I noticed that was kind of not so great for me anyways, because it's too much work for a game master to deal with that. So the next thing is most of the other items on here are basically your standard 5e stuff. It was just those things I noticed that were really tough to handle. So I have another character that I built last night to test this out. So this character is pretty much the same thing. I think the stats are kind of worked around differently, but yeah, I did notice the small size wasn't right, and of course I found that other thing. But the other thing is, since I don't have the actual setting, how do you handle the hoopak or the weapon that they possess, the special sling staff that the halflings or the Kender have? So what I did is I broke it down into 3 pieces. So you have a sling portion of it, and you can use sling bullets and stuff with that. You have the staff part of it that's blunt, and then on the very end there's a spear. So you have, you know, potentially 3 different weapons in one. So that's what's kind of cool about it. It's very versatile, but you also have to consider that Fantasy Grounds can usually only take 1 or 2 items. So you could actually turn this into like a thrown weapon property, but it's not really thrown. So you're going to have to figure out how you want to handle this. But I just broke it up into 3 pieces, so that way you're able to use each attack separately, and that's just the best you can do. You can't really make an item that has 3 attacks. That's what I'm getting at. So there's one piece of it that I made that's just the sling bullet with the range, and then there's the piece of it that's actually part of this weapon that has the staff and the sling part. And this is based off of the Festibalis, or the Festibalis. So this is another weapon that was similar to this. So you have these 2 different things that you can use here and then link it to the main weapon. But it doesn't really come out correctly in Fantasy Grounds unless you build it a certain way. So you get 1d6 bludgeoning, you get and then this doesn't cover the spear part of it. So I had to make that up as well. So that's what I'm saying. It's kind of a challenge for Game Master if you want to use this hoopak. So I just made 3 separate weapons, divided the weight between all of these. So when you equip them, you're not getting triple the amount of weight. So it was 4 pounds. So I just split the weight up to 2, and the sling portion, I only made it 1/10 of a pound. So it only weighs like 4.1 pounds. So it's not something that is in any module or anything. So you kind of have to make this up. Now we'll see what they give us when the actual setting comes out. But that was another thing, is if you want the sling staff, you got to make it yourself, or we're going to have to see what they come up with when they actually release the content. And then I gave him a little knife because I figured he'd have a little blade on him. And it's not like a dagger per se, so it does less damage, but it is a offensive weapon if you want to use it. And it's not thrown either, so you can only slice with it basically. And so I gave him the Brave ability, which is pretty common for halflings, so that wasn't a big deal. And then I gave him this Kender Ace's ability just to have the access to the table, the troublesome table. And then the Taunt is something that that I coded on here. There's stuff that's similar to it. And if you drop this down, you'll see that it has your wisdom save, and then it grants disadvantage on attacks, so that you can drag this to your enemy or whatever. And says you can use this as a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So there's 2 uses on each of these. So when you go into combat and actions, you'll actually have those set, so you can use them. Like this Kender Ace really doesn't do anything, but it does show that you've used it, and then you can check it off, and it'll basically stay on there for an hour, and that will let you know that the item is expired as well, because I set it for an hour. So when that thing rolls off your sheet, that means the item's gone too. So that's why I did it that way. And the taunt is just a cast saving throw, and then the effect is to drag onto your enemies to grant them disadvantage on attacks. So that's basically how this worked. So that's stuff I did custom just to see, so I could have it ready. I think on this table, though, I might create other tables to roll on. So I might have a new table that rolls on different tables that selects different items. Like this one is 5d6. You might be able to make a table and link it so that it automatically generates that for you. And then you can do your choice of this or that. So that's a choice. This random trinkets, you can make a random trinkets table. It's a little bit of work, but you could do it. One item of your choice, so that's another choice. And then one item of your choice. So there's a couple random tables and some choices here. And if you have a grappling hook or a crowbar, you can just make a parcel. That way you can just award it to the player much easier than trying to do it on the fly. So you make this a parcel right off the bat, because you already know what they're getting. And then you can actually essentially put all the tools in a parcel or separate parcels and award those. But there again, it's a lot of work. So might just make lists and then just drag the item that they pick from the list. It's probably the best policy, but they still have to roll on the table. So you don't even know what they're going to get. So that can be a real pain in the butt. So just keep that in mind if you're going to run a Kender with this Unearthed Arcana, is that it's not completely worked out. I don't know if they're going to keep this Kender Aces. And from the Game Master standpoint, I hope not, because I think it's kind of a pain in the butt. Or at least make this to where it's pared down, because there's way too many choices here. And I think that during a game, it'd be disruptive. So just from a player standpoint, it's pretty cool, because you get some cool random stuff. But on a Game Master standpoint, trying to stop the game to look all this up or give them the player's handbook and let them look it up is very time consuming. So that's something that I noticed right away. But anyways, so that's what I have. I didn't want to make this a big long tutorial, but I had to make a custom Who pack, and then I also did a couple of my own codes here in case I ever wanted to use something like this. Then I might make this module where it has these tables and lists, so that way this does come out, I'll already have something ready to go. One other thing I wanted to mention is that Matakure from the community made me a calendar for Krynn. So I actually have the moons, and then the months are all laid out. He made me the new calendar, and then I'm adding I added the moon tracker on top of it. So there's a couple extensions and a calendar, but anyways, so you can track the movement of the moons when you click on these based on what they are. So if you open up and configure the moons, you have the period, the duration, which is your weeks, and then the shift is the degrees and angles. So you have the length of the moon orbit, you have the days that are in a week, and then you have the shift, which is a percentage. So this will change the moon location as you go through the adventure if you keep track of game time, and that affects magic in this world. So that's something that I was working out. So that was interesting. And then I just kind of pulled up. I have some artwork that I was messing around with for this setting. These are some of the classic images from the original game. So there's some posters that I was working on. And then here's the moon tracking thing and how the moons of magic change how you cast. And they do have some rules for that in the sorcery section. So if you go to the Unearthed Arcana in the library under the module itself. So if you go to the modules and then you go to the actual Unearthed Arcana, in the reference manual, they would have something that they would talk about in here. So let's see if there's anything about moon. Yeah, so Moon Hills, here's the Heroes of Krynn. So it's a new document that, that basically goes through the Heroes of Krynn. The Sorcerer subclass for the Lunar Magic subclass allows sorcerers to explore deeper ties to the moon. So they do have some things that they're working on for this particular thing. And then they have some feats that are unique to this particular character build. And so you can use these Adept or the Knights. So you have Adept of different things. You have Divine Communications is probably your cleric. There's a Squire of Solamnia, Initiative High Sorcery. There's Divinely Favored, Knight of the Rose, Knight of the Sword. So they have different things that you can do, but basically they tie these things into the mode of the game, and it looks like evil clerics or evil wizards get warlock or wizard spells. The good ones get cleric or wizard spells, and the neutral ones get druid or wizard spells. So it depends on what you pick. But basically, these are all the things that affect from the moon and such. So it's something to consider when you start getting in that setting. Spell casting for magic can get a little complex. So anyways, I think that'll be it for today. I just want to give you a heads up, trying to take a little peek into that. I didn't build the sorcerer yet because that's a whole nother animal. So I wanted to get the moons of magic figured out first. So you take care, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you around.